Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about three books that I've recently read. I'm going to give a quick summary of each of them, and then I'm going to try to extract out one common theme that I believe each book hits from a different angle, but at similar depth. And so the books are The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Dr. Oliver Sacks, Why We Can't Wait by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat was written in 1985, or at least published in 1985. It's one of Dr. Sacks's more popular books, perhaps it's his most popular book. And it was written during a time where there was apparently a dichotomy or a shift in the healthcare community as it pertains to scientific research and inquiry. Dr. Sacks relates that his mentor, a Russian neuropsychologist named Alexander Luria, noted the same dichotomy and said that the healthcare community was leaning more towards a classical or technical traditional view of healthcare and research, and this meant more emphasis on hard data, objective data, statistics, charts, graph, research of that nature. And Luria, prior to Dr. Sacks, noticed that there was a de-emphasis on what Dr. Luria called the romantic element or the romantic aspect of healthcare. And this was the personal narrative experience of the individual with the ailment. It was the narrative or the story, the case history, the case studies. And both Drs. Luria and Sacks felt that this aspect was missing from the healthcare community. And so Luria wrote two books prior to The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. And those books were A Mind of a Mnemonist and The Man with the Shattered World. And those books inspired, at least in part, Dr. Sacks to try to pull from his experience to combine those classical and romantic aspects of uh, being a clinician. And so the book is a compilation of stories that Dr. Sacks picked out, which he felt would highlight the phenomenology of being through the lens of different patients who had different mental ailments. And so some patients had deficits in their visual cortex in their right hemisphere, and so they couldn't see the gestalt of the world. They couldn't see the whole. They had to piece things together from um, individual narrow aspects that they could see. And then some patients were autistic savants, where they had an IQ of, I believe, less than 60, and so they couldn't take care of themselves. They had uh, motor troubles, and they were classified as clumsy or stupid by the general population and even the general healthcare population. But Dr. Sacks, particularly in the latter category of patients, would come to illustrate that these people could direct choirs and they could perform in plays and they understood metaphor and they could recognize how to set goals and improve themselves. And he was criticizing our proclivity to reduce people to the rational, to the cold, cognitive aspects of our being. And so I thought it was a beautiful book. There's a great combination, at least in my opinion, of storytelling, engaging dialogue that conveys a person's being that's different from the average person's experience. And Dr. Sacks was able to combine that gracefully with technical jargon and explanation of different parts of the brain, different parts of the nervous system, and at some points giving off summations of the current literature at that time as it pertained to particular ailments or deficits. So the next book was Why We Can't Wait by Dr. King. And this book was written in, or at least published in the early to mid 1960s, and it detailed a lot of things, but primarily the strategic and tactical techniques utilized during the civil rights movement in 1963, particularly in Birmingham. Dr. King gives a brief history about the conditions of the Black American up to that point in the decades preceding, going back as far as Emancipation Proclamation, and saying that one of the reasons that there was a, what would you say, catalyst or pivotal point in 1963 was that it was 100 years from the Emancipation Proclamation, which was supposed to end slavery and bring about a more equal life for Black Americans. But many Black Americans in the 60s felt that there was little to no change. There was also this hypocrisy that was felt from the perspective of the Black American in terms of the nation trying to or willing to go to nuclear war for quote unquote freedom and democracy abroad and internationally, but failing to adhere by those same principles and spreading freedom and democracy and equality to all of its citizens at home. So 1963 was a point in time for the collective conscious and unconscious of the Black American, where stakes were high and there was a desire for change. Dr. King talks about his Judeo-Christian principles and how those were the substrate for the strategy of nonviolent direct action. And he also emphasized the importance of different tactical activities under that strategy, such as sit-ins, boycotting, marches, peaceful protests, with the concurrent legal actions that were supposed to shed light on the injustices that were occurring in Birmingham. It was Birmingham? I can't remember, in Alabama at that time. And so one of the things that surprised me was Dr. King and his peers and many of the other leaders in the civil rights movement, their faith in the American Constitution, the ideal of America, and they recognized that America has fallen short, but they weren't seeking to destroy the entire system. They were seeking radical reformation through nonviolent direct action, through love and through unity and through hope, all predicated on the substrate of Judeo-Christian principles. And to me, that was just absolutely beautiful. And Dr. King tells the story of the progress that they were able to make, some of the setbacks, the battles that they went through. The activities and protests in 1963 played a large part in bringing about the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. You could say that there was a culmination with the March on Washington, and there was also a shift or perhaps a revelation in the American consciousness, as Dr. King says, that for the first time, thanks to the advent of in the proliferation of technology such as the television, people everywhere in the country were able to see people of all races, men, women, children, united together, marching in Washington in pursuit of the ideal of equality for all peoples. And so I thought that was an amazing book. All right, final summary. To Kill a Mockingbird. Spoiler alert for anyone. I don't even know if that applies. So it's such an old book and such a classic, but yeah, spoiler alert. So To Kill a Mockingbird takes place in the 1930s in a town called Macomb in Alabama. Jim Crow South. It's told from the perspective of Scout Finch. She's I think 6 to 8-year-old white girl. She has an older brother named Jem and a father named Atticus Finch. And Atticus is the town lawyer, and the primary thread through the story is that Atticus is selected by the town to defend Tom Robinson, who is a Black man who has allegedly raped a white girl. And so Atticus and his family, Jem and Scout, have to wrestle with themselves and the town as, again, Jim Crow South. Questions are asked of Atticus. Why is he defending this Black man? Why do they even have to have a trial? Jem and Scout are bullied and harassed at school. They're harassed as they're walking through their neighborhood um, by different people. And many motifs come out of that book. There's innocence and evil. There's reductionist thinking. There's the mob versus the individual. One scene that I'll highlight is at one point, I believe that Scout just got into a fight at school trying to defend Atticus because some kids were bullying her and calling Atticus names. And Jem comes home, or excuse me, Scout comes home and asks Atticus, well, why are you defending Tom? Why are you doing this? The majority of people, the whole society, the community thinks that you're wrong for this. And Atticus replies, saying something along the lines of, what does he say? He says, the one thing that doesn't abide by majority rule is a person's conscience. So the way the primary thread of the story ends is that uh, even though the story comes out that through the public trial that it's highly, highly, highly unlikely that Tom Robinson actually raped this white girl, he is found to be guilty by the jury. One turning point, something that gave hope to the community, was that prior to this trial, it would have been obvious and very quick. The deliberating of the jury would have been very quick because it would have been quote unquote obvious that this black man committed this crime. But this time, the jury actually took an hour or so, which means that they were conflicted, and that conflict in their individual and collective conscious, at least from the perspective of Atticus and a few others, indicated a possible turning point or shift in the community away from their discriminatory and prejudice ways. Again, towards the end of the book, as Tom is going to jail, he's in jail, and news gets back to Atticus that he apparently tried to make a run for it and was shot dead. And a story is written in the local town journal saying that it's a sin to kill a cripple, which is an allusion to a mockingbird, because mockingbirds don't do anything, they just sing their songs, they're innocent. And so anyone who deliberately goes out of their way to harm innocence is evil and should scour their conscience to figure out what it is that they have going on. So those are the three summaries. The one motif that I want to pull out from all of those books is that of reductionistic thinking. In The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, you have this more classical view of being, of the phenomenology of our conscious experience. Everything has to be measured, everything has to be countable, everything has to be put in a box and rational and logical. And when you try to confine consciousness to this materialist Enlightenment worldview, you run the risk of failing to see the beauty in the variation and the depth in all people. And this was illustrated again. Dr. Sachs talks about his patients who were autistic savants who understood life perhaps more deeply than those physicians that called them stupid simply because they scored low on an IQ test. Of course, in Why We Can't Wait, lots of racism and discrimination and prejudice there, obviously. You have people who reduce the spirit of humanity, the souls of other people, down to their skin color. And in Strength to Love, it's interesting that Dr. King refers to skin color and other characteristics such as that as the accidents of birth, because it's not something that you get to choose. And race in terms of skin color purely, I feel like race in terms of culture is a separate conversation, but race in terms of skin color, for that to be the basis of your worldview and how you see other people, will definitely prevent you from seeing the beauty in who people are. And similar sentiment in To Kill a Mockingbird. This time it goes both ways. And Dr. King, this is why he cited To Kill a Mockingbird in Why We Can't Wait. It's not just that white people are only seeing black people as less than humans. It also goes the other way. There are white people that were helping black people. There were black people that were inhibiting the civil rights movement. Um, and this reminds me of the quote by Solzhenitsyn, paraphrasing, that the line between good and evil is drawn uh, through every human heart. It's not between states, it's not between sexes, it's not between races, it's not between socioeconomic dynamics. Everyone has the capacity for great good and great evil. And while that can be intimidating, that's also where faith comes in, and that's also where the beauty comes in terms of engaging with other people and having friends and having family and seeing the greatness and the creativity that we can manifest and the progress that we can make and the suffering that we can reduce, that we can diminish. All of that is in every single individual, as well as the great malevolence and the propensity to increase tragedy unnecessarily. And so, if we really want to get a better understanding of who we are and how we're supposed to act, we have to be careful to not have too reductionist a viewpoint or paradigm of the world and other people. That's the video. Thanks everyone for the time. See you in the next one.